Hi everyone, welcome back to Outside Xbox at Gamescom 2016. We've just got out of seeing the presentation for Metal Gear Survive, which is sort of, but not really, the next Metal Gear game.
So the first reason this isn't Metal Gear Solid 6 is that there is no Kojima. I mean, this is pretty well documented. Kojima obviously has left Konami.
Right.
But what's kind of interesting is, I think a lot of the team that worked on Metal Gear Solid 5 are still sort of present there and still working on this game.
Yeah, they wouldn't really go into details about who was actually working on the game, but I mean, the people who made Metal Gear Solid 5, it wasn't just Kojima on his own.
Yeah, right, and he didn't pull all the team away to join the new sort of Kojima Productions.
So while he was a massive, massive part of it, there are still people who would have worked on the previous Metal Gear games who will be working on this.
Yeah, I mean, whether or not Konami in the future decides to do a Metal Gear Solid 6, a proper canon entry, it remains to be seen.
So in terms of the timeline for when this game takes place, it's actually before Metal Gear Solid 5.
Right, yeah, so that's another reason why it's not Metal Gear Solid 6. It's actually, it happens before the events of Metal Gear Solid 5 as you play them.
So it's the end of Ground Zeroes when Mother Base is being destroyed and Boss and Kaz, they take off in that helicopter ride that doesn't end super well for anyone.
Yes.
They take off, and you sort of watch those interesting characters leave, and you're like, wow, I wonder what adventures they'll have.
And you're stuck as a sort of random employee of Mother Base.
You're one of the Mother Base people, so presumably the people in the game will have names like Hungry Hippo and
I hope so.
Furious Octopus.
If I don't get Hungry Hippo on my team, I'll be really, really sad.
Yeah, but then, for some reason, a interdimensional wormhole opens up.
Everything gets pulled away, including Mother Base itself, up into this wormhole and into an alternate dimension.
Yeah, so the place that the game takes place in is this other dimensional plane where it's a big sort of featureless desert with sort of half-formed structures that have been pulled through these wormholes. So there'll be things like Mother Base platforms just slam down into the sand. That's all we've seen so far, but presumably other locations, because it would be very boring if it was just deserts and Mother Base platforms.
Yeah, I'm expecting it to be sort of open world though. That's kind of obviously the way Metal Gear Solid 5 was built, and this is still coming kind of hot on the heels of Metal Gear Solid 5. That was a big project. I expect there's going to be a lot of that DNA kind of visible, and I know open world is probably going to be part of that.
So really it's more of a spin-off.
Yeah, so this is something they've been very clear about because they don't want to confuse people. This is not part of the main Metal Gear Solid canon. This is an alternate universe, and it is an alternate timeline and storyline. So everything that happens here, all the weird kind of biological zombies that are running around, and the fact that Mother Base has been ripped out and stuck in a wormhole is not part of the main storyline. I guess this is partly Konami sort of testing the water. They recognise that people are going to be resistant to a Metal Gear game that doesn't involve Kojima. So I think what they're trying to do is say, all right, this is something we're going to try, and it doesn't affect the main storyline, and if you guys hate it, you can just ignore it and pretend it never existed, essentially. But for people who are kind of happy to try out a Metal Gear game that doesn't have Kojima, then maybe they'll get a decent sort of experience out of it.
So in terms of how it actually plays, it's a co-op game. I mean, primarily, it's 1 to 4 players, right?
Yeah, right. And I think that's one of those things where I think, no matter how much you love Metal Gear Solid 5, there's this part of you that's thinking you've got this amazing stealth sandbox and you kind of, finding different approaches to taking out bases and stuff. There's always going to be a part of you that thinks, I wonder how this would play in co-op with someone else, on the other side of the base, or like cooperating. And so, regardless of what you think of the sort of setting and the theming, it is going to be interesting to be playing with Metal Gear mechanics in that kind of co-op environment.
Yeah, I was a little put off by the enemies that they showed us, so these sort of like organic zombie things missing half their heads and stuff. I just don't think it's going to be as satisfying to be doing stealth gameplay against monsters than it is against like well-trained soldiers.
Although one of the things they would say was that's just the sort of start of the kind of enemies you'll be facing. So maybe we will be facing off against more intelligent, creatures, or humans, or Metal Gear type robots as well. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of enemies they sort of expand it to, because at the moment all they've shown are kind of zombies, and gives it that kind of Left 4 Dead vibe, but that's not really what Metal Gear is about.
Yeah, they were talking about like new weapons and stuff. They showed off that bow, which has got a sort of spinning arrow that you can fire from it. They were talking about spears and stuff. I think that's going to tie into the story that they talked about, which is that, I mean, there is a story for a start, but you're mother-based soldiers are going to have to sort of band together to try and figure out what's going on and get back
home,
to the real world. Also, it's not going to be a full price game, so I mean that's something, right?
Yeah, right. So all the people who are kind of worried about this, again, I know there's been a lot of resistance to this online, but at the very least, this is going to be something that's priced probably around the same level as Ground Zeroes. You know, again, it's a kind of experimental thing. I really feel like this is Konami sort of gently trying to test the water, and obviously the fans have responded quite negatively towards it, but yeah, it's not going to be a full price game. I guess don't expect something of the scale of that, but they're hoping it's going to be a very replayable, you know, in the same way that Ground Zeroes, you can kind of go back and keep sort of sessioning it. And if you look at something like Left 4 Dead as well, that was a co-op game that you could keep playing, and they kind of shook things up. The enemy arrangements were different and things like that. So, you know, I'm hoping that for quite a small price, you'll get something that actually you can replay quite frequently.
Metal Gear Solid 5 took so long to develop, and it had such great mechanics and such a great engine. It would seem a shame for them to just go, right, now that game is done, we can shelve all of that work. So to have more experiences using that engine and using those mechanics is, I mean, to me, that's a good thing. I mean, but I assume that a lot of the resistance is the lack of Kojima. And also, I mean, the story is a bit outlandish, but then when has Metal Gear not been outlandish?
Exactly. And again, they've said, you know, it's sort of a spin-off, it's an alternate universe, it's kind of an extreme thing. I mean, they genuinely use the word spin-off, which is, you don't often hear when people are talking about a new game that's coming out, and they're like, yeah, it's like a spin-off. But I think for a smaller price, maybe more people will be prepared to at least give it a punt.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's made a brilliant first impression, but then we've seen so little of it so far. I think it's probably worth reserving judgment until we see a bit more of it.
And like you say, it's coming quite hot on the heels of Metal Gear Solid 5. For a game that took that long to build, this is a very quick sort of semi-sequel.
It's out next year at some point. So some
2017.
point before the end of next year. So it's out soon.
Yeah, which is, in a way, I find that kind of encouraging, because it means that there'll probably be a lot of Metal Gear Solid 5 DNA in there, and I'm always happy to play more Metal Gear Solid, and if it's in co-op, then that's great.
So that was Metal Gear Survive here on the show floor at Gamescom 2016. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and we'll see you next time on Outside Xbox.